Hi there, thank you for watching this video of us making our Mappa Burl dining room table. We will link a number of steps and additional tutorials in the description box. Enjoy! We sawed the Mappa Burl slab in half with a circular saw. It took a number of passes. We made a router sled jig to flatten the slab. We will link a couple of tutorials on how to make your own in the description box, since this worked, but there's absolutely better ways to do it. As visual people, sometimes you need to find creative ways to see how a project will look in the end. Here we made a table out of tape on the floor and tried different configurations of the slab pieces to make sure we had the most beautiful option. Next, we made a melamine mold to pour the epoxy into. As part of making sure the melamine mold is watertight and doesn't stick to the epoxy, we covered all of the mold surfaces with tuck tape. As a final measure to keep the epoxy from leaking from the mold, we sealed all corners and edges with silicone. In preparation for the epoxy, we sealed the edges of the live edge with a quick dry epoxy. Here we use TotalBoat 5:1. Sealing the edges helps prevent bubbles during the main pour. To determine the amount of epoxy we needed, we used a simple volume calculation. We multiplied the length of the pour by the depth of the pour by the average width of the pour and then converted it to liters. We will link the full instructions in the description box. After much research, we decided to go with EcoPoxy liquid plastic 2:1 for the river of our table. The budget for the epoxy was substantial because we estimated initially we would need around 20 liters for this project. center of the river, we decided to mix EcoPoxy pigments in Maui and avocado to create the turquoise sea effect. After mixing, it was finally time for the pour. These colors look so beautiful. Our first pour was about 1/3 of an inch deep. We used a heat gun to prevent bubbles in the epoxy. If your project needs additional epoxy pours, wait until the epoxy is tacky. For us, this was about 17 hours after our first pour. To add depth to our river, for our second pour we just used a clear epoxy. Since we did the second pour while the epoxy was tacky, we didn't need to sand it for it to grip to the epoxy from the first pour. The tuck tape on the mold made it very easy to remove our table from it. This is just bonus footage before we sanded. I absolutely loved how beautiful this looked in the sunlight. Sanding is the most important, even though it's the most boring part of a river table. We sanded the table from 80 grit to 1000 grit, going very slowly and checking the progress frequently. Take your time with sanding and expect it to take hours. After sanding, we buffed our table to finish it. Link some of our favorite river table making tutorials below. Let us know in the comments what you think of our table or if you have any questions. Thanks so much for watching.